theistic scuffles here, and now I want to do something different and give an obituary, a bit of a eulogy for a friend who meant a lot to me when I was a teenager, in particular for an episode when I was 16, actually 15, going on 16, and really digging into some Young Earth Creationist materials, including the Morrises, particularly the elder Senior Morris. The gentleman of whom I speak was himself a young Earth Creationist named Robert L. Whitelaw, and he was a nuclear engineer who taught at Virginia Polytechnic Institute, and he resided in Blacksburg, Virginia, and he passed away at the age of 90 in 2008, and he had lived a pretty long life. Just a few things about him. One of his trademark flagship creationist articles had to do with radiocarbon dating, and it was entitled Time, Life, and History in the Light of 15,000 Radiocarbon Dates. And that one you'll even find today, even though it was written quite some time ago in the Creation Research Society. You'll still find it referenced in discussions online between creationists and evolutionists about how reliable radiocarbon dating is and how he believed that they needed to be recalibrated. At any rate, Dr. Robert Whitelaw was born in China to missionary parents in 1917, and he was project manager for a power plant of the world's first and only nuclear-powered merchant ship called the NS Savannah. At any rate, getting back up to a more personal note, I met Robert Whitelaw in person when I was 15, and I had traveled by plane to the first International Conference on Creationism, which was held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I attended some really interesting lectures / seminars there, including one by John C. Davis about how the first chapters of Genesis were to be taken in a more historical, literal fashion, taking Yom, the Hebrew Yom, as a literal 24-hour solar day. At any rate, Robert Whitelaw was there, and he met me there. I believe he met me at the airport in Pittsburgh and took me to my room accommodations. And it was just wonderful. He and his wife, Clara, welcomed me and were just kind of my guide while I was at this conference. I think we probably attended different lectures. One of the big events there was the debate between Dwayne Gish and Vincent Sarich, zoology professor at UC-Berkeley. Very fascinating, a lot of humor in that debate. One thing that really stands out, though, about Robert Whitelaw, he had the presuppositional understanding of creationism versus evolutionism. Whatever your mindset was, if you were of a spiritual mindset and you were convinced that God's word was truth, then you would see all of the scientific evidence in light of the biblical testimony, the biblical record about God's creation. If you didn't have that spiritual mindset, you would interpret the scientific evidence in a very contrary fashion, seeing long ages, trying to deny different forms of catastrophism in the geologic record, going to links to avoid the scientific evidence as it would point to a young Earth. So that was Dr. Robert Whitelaw's perspective. Well, he really followed through on this because we after the conference was all over, and we drove back to Wisconsin, where I lived as a teenager, back home, and we drove all the way through a portion of Michigan. I believe we went up to the Upper Peninsula. We stopped at a McDonald's, a fast food restaurant. I think it was a McDonald's, but at any rate, we bumped into someone there. He must have noticed that this person, it was a lady, was also an attendee at the International Conference on Creationism in Pittsburgh. And days after the conference was over, and he mentioned to me after this meeting, this kind of chance or serendipitous meeting, he mentioned to me that the odds of this taking place, of meeting someone from the Creationist Conference who also had driven hundreds and possibly thousands of miles from Pittsburgh towards their destination was infinitesimally improbable. It was highly improbable that there would have been that encounter. So he was one of those that, due to that presuppositional outlook, he was very leery of trying to say, well, evolution is just wildly improbable, and that's why it should not be given credibility. It should not be believed. So at any rate, I had a wonderful, edifying time with Robert and his wife Clara, and I'm sorry to see him go. He was 90 years old, and again, he lived a very full and productive life as a nuclear engineer and a young Earth creationist. Thank you.